Welcome, Dungeon Hackers. Today we are making a video talking about rolling stats.
This is exciting!
Your attributes, strength, dex, con, etc., are very important to your character. This affects your attack rolls, your skills, your saving throws. Pretty much everything in the game is affected by how you roll stats. And there's a lot of different ways to roll stats for your characters, and today we're going to take a look at several of them. The first one we're going to look at is an old school one of the very first ones, and this one is pretty brutal. Just 3d6 straight down the line. You can see these stats here on the screen. I rolled up 4 sets earlier today, and you can see that some of these are pretty brutal, and it's very swingy in how it works. So that first set of stats, the highest roll is a 10, and you've got 2 6s. This is a character that would be almost unplayable in most Dungeons & Dragons games. But the next one has a couple of 16s and some 13s. Its lowest stat is a 10, which is the same as the highest stat for the previous one. The second one has a couple of 12s, and the final one is almost as bad as the first one, just barely better. And again, remember, this is rolling them in order. So you would have a 9 for strength, a 10 for dex, a 6 for your constitution, 6 for your intelligence, 10 for wisdom, and 8 for charisma with that first set of rolls. That is pretty awful. However, there are some pros and cons for this particular method. This method really encourages role-play and creativity. If you've got a wizard with sub-average intelligence, especially sub-average intelligence like a 6, then you're going to have to be really creative in how you play that character and what spells you would take along the way. This is also good for campaigns that are supposed to be dangerous and deadly. I've played in some campaigns where it was expected that somebody dies almost every week, and everybody has spare characters sitting in their back pocket ready to bring in for the next session. The cons for this are obviously the very bad rolls that you could have, and I did roll a lot worse than average when I rolled those stats. An average roll should be about 10, 10 and a half, and you can see there's some arrays in this output that don't have any rolls at or above average. This can also force you to play a class you don't like. If you have really bad rolls all the way across, except for maybe a high intelligence, then you might be forced to play a wizard even though that's not your real preferred playstyle. The second method is 4d6 drop the lowest. In this method, you'll roll 6 stats by rolling 4 dice and picking the 3 best ones. You can then assign those stats to any one of your abilities that you want. You can see in this method, each of the stats that I rolled does have at least one below a 10. The first one here has a 16, a 15, a 14, a 13. Those are all pretty good for your stats. A 13 being your 4th lowest stat at character creation is pretty good. But you can see on that bottom one there, it's actually got a 6. Even with dropping the lowest die roll, I still ended up with a 6 in one of the stats, meaning that one of the abilities is going to be extremely low and have a lot of penalties. No matter what stat you want to attribute that to, you're still going to run into problems when you're doing skill checks or maybe saving throws, depending on where you've put that. The pros of this method is you still get the excitement of rolling, and you get a little bit better scores than you did in the previous method. You also can move them around to whatever attributes you want, allowing you to play the kind of character that you want to play. The chance of having an occasional very low score or a very high score causes you to have some very interesting options when playing your character and role-playing them. The cons of this method is that it is still possible to get some really bad rolls, which is especially painful when somebody else at the table gets a very good roll. This leads to a big difference in the power level of individual characters. And while there's nothing wrong with that, and that's fine, it can lead to some players feeling like they're just not very useful and not having very much fun. The third method is the point buy method. Players have 27 points to work with in order to purchase upgrades in their abilities. It's not a straight one for one. The higher of a stat you want to buy, the more it costs. A stat of 8 costs 0, and anything higher than that, you have to start spending your points, up to a maximum of 15, costing you 9 points. Little quick math, you could have 3 scores starting at a 15, and then your other 3 would be stuck down at 8. This can lead to a character with several attributes with a negative bonus if you end up going the 15, 15, 15, 8, 8, 8 route, which can happen if you're playing a character that needs several different stats in order to be really effective. The pros of this particular method are that everybody is on equal footing. In the previous 2 methods, it's entirely possible to have a superpowered character and then a peasant running around with them. In this method, everybody's on equal footing and can have whatever scores best fit their character, but everybody's starting on the same level. It also puts the players in complete control of their stats, as they can put them up to whatever they want as long as they've got the points to buy them. The cons of this method is that you aren't using any dice, and this is a game that uses a lot of dice. Sometimes it's no fun to not throw your math rocks, which can also force characters to min-max a little bit with the limited number of points with which to buy stats. This can lead to some real cookie-cutter characters that 2 fighters may look exactly the same because they've only got so many points to put in each of their stats. So they put as many as they can in strength and con and dex, and then intelligence, wisdom, and charisma fall to the wayside. If you're enjoying this video, please subscribe and hit that like button. Both of those really help me to get these videos out to more people. And with that said, let's take a look at method number 4. Method number 4 is the standard array. Everybody gets the same set of 6 numbers: 15, 14, 13, 12, 10, and 8. And then they can put them wherever they want to put them on their character's abilities. The pros of this method are that it gives you a slightly above average set of attributes. It's also a very quick method for players to create characters, and it is super consistent considering everybody has the same numbers to put in the same places. The major con for this, much like the previous point buy one, is that it can really lead to cookie cutter characters, as we all have the exact same scores to put into our attributes. Along with the point buy, the standard array also has another con, in that there's no way to start with a score higher than 15. At least when you're rolling dice, there's a chance to get a 16, 17, or 18. And when you roll up a character and you get one of those, you really feel like you're powerful and you've done something. But that's not an option with these 2 methods. Method 5 is the method that we've used the last several times we've started campaigns, where every player at the table rolls 1 array. We use the 4d6 drop the lowest method, and we roll 6 stats. This gives each player 1 array, but we mix it up a little bit by allowing any player to use any array. So if one character rolls an 18, but doesn't have anything else over a 12 perhaps, then if I want to make a wizard, I might take that array and use it because I really just need a high intelligence. But somebody else may roll a couple of 16s and a 15, and somebody wanting to play a barbarian may take that so they can have a higher strength, constitution, and dexterity to really round out their character well. A couple of pros with this method is that everyone gets the excitement of rolling dice, and you again have the possibility of having higher numbers rolled. And also, since anybody can use one of the other player's arrays, then it means that everybody is on equal footing. Nobody has much higher stats than someone else unless a player chooses a lower set of stats for some particular reason. There are some cons to this method, and the first one is that if one character gets super good rolls, then everyone's going to use that array. And if everybody uses that array, then you have the same cookie cutter characters as you had in the previous methods. It also has the potential, if everybody picks the really good array, that you have a group of superheroes at level 1 with a whole bunch of very high stats and just kind of really powerful. Now, that might not be a con. Maybe that's a pro, because that's the kind of game you want to run. But it is something that's possible, so you should keep that in mind if you choose to use this method. The sixth and final method that we're going to talk about is rolling your stats based on your class. You can see on this table here that I've pulled from earlier editions of Dungeons & Dragons that depending on which class you have, you roll a certain amount of dice for each attribute. For our example, I will take a look at the fighter row here. You can see that strength is the most important, and it has a 9. And what this means is you're going to roll 9d6 for your strength. Your next highest number is 8 for your constitution, and then a 7 for your dexterity, 6 for your charisma, 5 for your wisdom, and then just 3 for your intelligence. Of course, this particular method also has comeliness in it, which is an optional stat from earlier editions of the game. Now, while still using this method to determine how many dice you roll, the method I like uses a slightly different spread of dice. For your prime attribute, whatever that may be, we're going to roll 8 dice, and then 6, 5, 4, 3, and 3. So it's not quite as overpowered as this one may end up being. I did play a barbarian character back in 2nd edition that I rolled up using these stats, and I had some phenomenal rolls with a 17 for strength, even though I rolled 9 dice. But then I had an 18 for constitution and an 18 for dexterity. I also rolled a 16 for charisma and then an 18 for my comeliness, which was very impressive with the low number of dice for some of these other rolls. However, I also rolled a 6 for my intelligence. And I can't tell you how many times being a juggernaut that has trouble reading was a problem for my character. At one point, I lost a couple points of intelligence temporarily, and it removed my ability to speak, and I was only able to grunt and point at things for like an entire adventure, which honestly was kind of fun. So I rolled up some stats using these, and we'll take a look at them in the guise of these being for a fighter. The strength roll will be the first column, the con, the second column, the dexterity in the third column, charisma in the fourth, wisdom, and then intelligence. If you look at the first row, you've got an 18 strength, which is fantastic, but you've only got a 12 con and a 14 dex. So even with the 18 in your strength, you've got some mediocre physical stats. But the big one you'll notice is the 3. I rolled 4d6 and I rolled 4 ones and got a 3 for that particular stat. So I am perhaps the least charismatic creature on the face of the planet. You'll notice in the second row, we've got an 11 strength and a 16 constitution and a 17 dexterity. If this is a fighter, that might work okay. You're just more of a dex-based fighter. You probably aren't going to be swinging big, heavy weapons. In fact, you may not even be able to if they have strength requirements. But you can certainly flit in and out of battle and stab people, and you've got pretty good constitution to give you some good hit points for when you do get hit. So that works okay for a fighter, but just for a second, let's pretend like we were making a wizard. With this second row, intelligence would be your first stat. And since this method doesn't let you move them around, because you rolled 8d6 for your intelligence, and you only got an 11, it doesn't really matter terribly what a lot of your other stats are. You're probably not going to be a very good wizard. So the inflexibility of this method for moving things around could come back to bite you, even with all the extra dice that you're rolling. Now, a few house rules that I have used in different situations, one of them we use almost every time, is re-rolling ones. When we roll 4d6, drop the lowest, we also re-roll all the ones. but just the ones on the initial roll. If you then roll a 1, you don't get to then again re-roll it. This bumps up the average score a little bit and keeps you from having really, really bad rolls. For example, rolling 4 1s and getting a 3 for your charisma. There's also the mulligan rule, saying if you really don't like your results from your roll, you can re-roll your entire array once, but you got to keep the second roll. And the third house rule that I like is the safety net. The safety net sets a certain score that if you add all 6 of your attributes together, if you are less than that score, then you can re-roll your stats. For example, if all your stats added together don't equal 70, then your average attribute is less than a 12 and you're probably not a very good character. Or if you have no stats above a 13, maybe you can re-roll all your stats. I've even seen some tables where if you have more than 2 of your attributes with a negative modifier, you can also re-roll. So those are all the different methods that I've used in the past for rolling up our characters. There's probably a lot more. I would love to hear from you down in the comments below what kinds of methods you have used in the past, if they differ from these, for rolling up stats. I'm also curious if you have any other house rules that you may have used in the past, so that perhaps I can steal those from you, like I'm hoping that you will steal some of these from me. And remember, you don't have to follow every rule and every roll. This is your game and you can hack the dungeon.